I'm David Land. This is Indy 500 month. So thanks to the horrible winter we have had in this country, we actually get a full month of May. Tests that were planned to take place in March actually were pushed back to April 30th to May 2nd. Of course, May 2nd is the day we're talking about, or I guess I'm recording on today, but that's not an official IndyCar Series sanctioned test. It's a manufacturer test, therefore there is no official data to look at and analyze. So we're going to be talking specifically about the April 30th and May 1st testing sessions. April 30th was for the veterans of the IndyCar Series, or at least the veterans of the Indianapolis 500 who are participating in more than one race this season. And that's where we saw the big speeds, the big lap times, and some of the big names. And then on May 1st, yesterday, if you're watching this on the day it's uploaded, that was the rookie orientation and the refresher program for veterans drivers who have not participated in a Verizon IndyCar Series race since the 2017 Indianapolis 500. There were 27 drivers who participated over the 2 days. There were actually less cars in attendance, something like 26 cars, I believe, took to the track. A couple of drivers shared rides, particularly out of the Schmidt-Peterson team, after one of their cars suffered a mechanical issue. So Tony Kanaan was actually the fastest, not only in the no-toe speed, which means he didn't have a draft. There's not an official no-toe time, but some people were reporting it as 222, a high 222, low 223 mile per hour average speed around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. But his actual toe time, the time he did in traffic, was a 226.181, and that actually compares to the Aero Kit cars last year, which a lot of people are saying might be faster than these. Doesn't look like it, because on day one of practice last year, Marco Andretti did a 226 mile an hour lap, though that was a faster lap. I believe it was a high 226, almost 227. But you have to consider that that was a car that had been developed for 2 years with that Aero Kit. This was rolling off the truck essentially day one. I believe it's maybe day 2 or 3 that the Foyt team has actually had with the Super Speedway Aero Kit. But looking at that, obviously Tony Kanaan has helped that team out immensely, as we kind of expected at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. He brought a lot of his Ganassi engineers over with him. So I'm hoping the Foyt team is strong this year. If Matthias Lace gets up to speed, we know James Davison is going to be very fast. The Foyt team could not only be spoilers, they could be favorites going in. Every other car that was kind of in the top half of the field was in the 225 mile per hour range, just going from Kanaan down. Of course, Kanaan was on top. Then it was Pagenaud at 225, Marco Andretti at 225, Gabby Chavez at 225, which is interesting. Not so much that he's up there, but that some people weren't expecting it. People acting surprised by that. I would offer to everyone that every track they have gone to this season has been something new to them, because of course they've had to use a high downforce Aero Kit, depending on the short oval Aero Kit, which is a little slightly lower downforce versus the road course Aero Kit. But regardless, they use the big wings. And, of course, Harding Racing, who Gabby Chavez drove for last year and this year as well, participated in all the super speedway races last year, meaning Indianapolis, Pocono, and Texas. Actually got a couple top 10s out of it at Indianapolis and at Texas and Pocono. They actually qualified quite well. So they have a good baseline setup, and it was proved here as well. Scott Dixon, no real surprise there. Sebastian Bourdais, the same. Those two drivers were the fastest in last year's month of May, once again, kind of proving they're up there. Bit of a, I guess not a surprise, but something I was hoping we'd see, especially considering some of the comments I made earlier. Spencer Pigot up there in the Ed Carpenter Racing car, actually the fastest of the Ed Carpenter cars, actually going faster than Ed Carpenter, and obviously Danica Patrick, who was on a rookie orientation program and really couldn't get up to speed. And then Ed Jones, also in the 225 mile an hour range. Of course, all of those times done with a toe. The fastest no-toe speed was about 223, 222 miles an hour. I expect that's going to go up significantly throughout the month as conditions continue to improve. The teams get a better handling on the setup, and the drivers begin to find out what they like. This is what you probably came for, and what is kind of interesting to me. Slowest overall. Now, of course, there's going to be quite a few caveats in here that I will mention, because, of course, a lot of the slower drivers in this group are drivers who were a part of the rookie orientation program and did not have the reins off of them to be able to go for a 226-mile-an-hour lap. But there is an interesting trend in there, and we'll get to it. So slowest overall, and this will make the comments section, I don't know, happy or sad, we'll find out. Danica Patrick at a 2:18.5, dead even. Of course, Danica Patrick was one of the last drivers to complete their rookie orientation program, and Danica was never actually out on track with no speed restrictions on her. She had to hit, target lap speed in order to pass her refresher program, which she did right before the gun. Another driver who is, of course, the second slowest, and another driver who had to pass that rookie or the refresher orientation program relatively late in the day. He was actually the last driver out on track, Sage Karam, at 2:18.6. Then we had Kyle Kaiser, first of the drivers who completed the rookie orientation program, and I believe he actually got some laps in on the track without speed restrictions. He did a 2:19.470. Then it was Jay Howard, who participated in a refresher course. Of course, he was there last year as well and was a veteran from 2011, his rookie year, 2:19.648. The interesting thing about Jay Howard is Howard actually completed the program not in his own car or even the car of his teammate Robert Wickens. He had to go to James Hinchcliffe's car because Wickens' car had some trouble in the morning session and was unable to come back out for whatever reason. So he wasn't the only one who was driving James Hinchcliffe's car, but we'll get to that later. Matthias Leist for AJ Foyt Racing at 220.073. Interesting thing about Matthias Leist, he looked very disciplined. Of course, he won the Freedom 100 last year. And what's interesting about Matthias Leist is the fact that despite the fact that Tony Kanaan went 226 miles an hour, Leist was very disciplined. He didn't go and do what I think a lot of people feared he would and chase Kanaan and put it in the wall on his rookie orientation. A lot of people, including Robin Miller, have mentioned that Kanaan seems to really have taken to being the team leader at Foyt, and it's really beginning to show. I think if they can calm Leist down, he's going to show a lot of speed. Of course, he showed it at St. Petersburg, and of course, he showed it last year at the Freedom 100. We move on to the next car in the Schmidt-Peterson stable, and that is the Robert Wickens, or at least Robert Wickens, not the next car, because, of course, he was also using James Hinchcliffe's number 5 Aero car after only setting 210-mile-an-hour laps in his number 6. That car broke, so they had to do a bit of a ride swap. Wickens went 220.111 miles an hour. And then we move into the cars and the drivers from the veterans section. So this is where we get a little bit more interesting. Jack Harvey was the slowest on day 1, April 30th, 220.589 miles per hour. So that makes me think, or at least makes me a bit worried for that team, at least at this point, because you would assume, I believe he was running in traffic at one point or another during kind of the final hour of the session. So if you think 220 with a tow, they've got a lot of work to do. And then the next slowest driver, and the last one I wrote down, is James Hinchcliffe. In the same Aero 5 car that was tested by Howard and Wickens at 221.666 miles an hour. So if we look at that, there is a big trend there, and it is the fact that the 4 drivers in the Schmidt-Peterson stable are in that bottom tier of the slowest speeds. Now, of course, 3 of those speeds were set with the same car, but then again, we look at it, and you do have, especially at the end of at the end of the April 30th session, the 2 bottom feeders were the Schmidt, or at least Schmidt cars out of the Schmidt stable. Of course, the Meyer Shank Racing car, hey look, it's on my shirt, is not technically a Schmidt car, but it comes out of that stable, though it is prepared by the Meyer Shank Racing team. But if you look at it early, could the Schmidt cars be the ones that are maybe going to get bumped? Because if you look at it as well, We don't know about Dreyer Reinbold yet. Of course, Sage Karam, the only driver who was allowed to participate in the refresher program with Dreyer and Reinbold. Of course, J.R. Hildebrand going to be also on that team. You got to wonder about that, but again, he was on a rookie orientation program. Same for Danica Patrick. Neither of those drivers really had the leash taken off of them. If you look at Spencer Pickett's times at 225 miles an hour, you'd think that maybe Danica will be able to get up near that. She had some trouble with the power steering, or the lack thereof power steering. She was complaining about the wheel weight. And we'll see how that ends up affecting her later on down the line. So a lot of things to look at speed-wise. Of course, the speed is measured, not lap time at Indianapolis. Also, the car qualifies, not the driver. And this is going to be something that probably will become key in bump day. If a driver were to get hurt or a driver otherwise could not make qualifying, there is a possibility that another driver could put that car in the field. There's also the possibility that someone could get bought out of a ride. Let's just to say, for example, Buddy Lazier actually qualifies, and somebody with a big sponsor, a big name, big team, let's say Ed Jones, doesn't qualify. NTD Data can take money to Buddy Lazier and say, hey, we want Ed Jones in this car in the race. Here's a boatload of cash plus a percentage of the winnings. Buddy, you're out. Ed Jones is in. That's happened a few times. I believe I've mentioned it in previous videos. Don't need to go over it too heavily here. But one of the big things that I think grabbed a lot of attention was the Aeroscreen. And, of course, that was tested for the first time, I believe, on a super speedway by Josef Newgarden. And it seemed like early on Josef Newgarden was not particularly happy with it. But they made some changes, particularly to his visor. Went from a smoke visor to a clear one. That seemed to help. And here's actually an interesting thing. There was actually a rumor going around that was started by Marshall Pruitt as a joke. I don't believe he actually intended to start this as a rumor, but he had said that the top speed on the straightaway was 243 miles an hour with the Aeroscreen. Not true. It was a joke. But what's interesting to note is that Newgarden actually went faster with the Aeroscreen on his car than he did officially in the test session without it. He did a 224 mile an hour lap, though because it's unofficial, we don't know the exact speed, but we do know it was in the 224 mile an hour range. And in the official test, which only took place minutes earlier, he did a 223.699, and that was as fast as he went, and presumably that was in traffic. Of course, with the Aeroscreen, it was without any traffic, though the track conditions were a little bit better because it was later in the day, so who knows the actual speed of a car with an Aeroscreen. Again, there's a lot of testing that needs to happen. I don't expect an Aeroscreen to be on a car in race conditions for quite a while. That would probably be at the soonest a 2019 thing. Possibly we'll even look at it going further back to the next chassis design, which, by the way, Marshall Pruitt actually reported a pretty big story. Kind of buried the lead a little bit, but, it's not actually a leading story. It's potential that not only Dallara is going to be participating in 2021, 2022, depending on when all the pieces fall together for a new chassis design, but if a third engine manufacturer is brought into the fore, there could be open possibilities for more chassis manufacturers. Now, why an extra engine would mean more chassis manufacturers could come in versus if only the same two stay around, who knows? But that could make some interesting combinations. Of course, Penske has a very good relationship with Oreca because of their IMSA program. Could Oreca build cars? They have been, or they at least were interested in building an aero kit at one point during the aero kit regulations. So I would look at them as certainly a potential second chassis manufacturer would that happen. But that's a long way down the line. Let's talk about one more thing before I head off, and that is the broadcast. If you guys didn't know why I like Kevin Lee, now maybe you have, because he kept 12 hours of testing entertaining. But it wasn't Kevin Lee that was necessarily the MVP, despite the fact that Kevin Lee did an absolutely fantastic job. And by the way, thanks for the shout out. It was all about Anders Krohn. My goodness, Anders Krohn, you are one good boy. And let me tell you, if this is what we're expecting on NBC Gold, it's worth every penny. If we get coverage of the sessions as good as this with Kevin Lee and Anders Krohn and a full pit reporting team, I don't know. That's worth paying for. It's amazing that they're giving this away on YouTube. Because this may be some of the best free content I have seen put out about motorsports. This is what I've been saying for years about the YouTube coverage of IndyCar, is that, dang it, we need some commentary that is specific to the internet broadcast. We don't need IndyCar radio necessarily being, just, well, let's throw the IndyCar radio audio over the stream. We need a dedicated team that is interacting with the viewers that are watching on the internet, because that is something that, if you look at a Twitch stream or a YouTube stream, that's a big part of internet broadcasting, and I think that's something that IndyCar hasn't necessarily figured out yet. But with the Alonso test last year and now this, I hope they figured it out. And of course, with NBC Gold coming around next year, we're not going to have the free to everybody coverage anymore. So how much does it matter with the viewer interaction? Who knows? But I just wanted to give that a big shout out because it's very important. So thank you guys so much for listening to me ramble. We got some big content coming very soon. Got some reviews of some Indy 500 stuff that I think you're going to be interested in. Some history stuff that, of course, is always very interesting. And then some gameplay stuff. I've actually got an Elgato game capture coming in the mail, and so the videos will be in 60 frames per second for gameplay now. That's going to be very exciting. So I hope to see you here for the rest of Indy 500 month. Of course, got the Bandwagoners Guide coming as well. I'm going to be at the track starting for the Grand Prix. I know a lot of people were asking whether or not, or why I wasn't at the test. Just couldn't make it work logistically. Life got in the way, and stuff happens. So thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube. Check out some more motorsports content. Subscribe for Indy 500 month, and we'll see you in the next video.